There is absolutely no evidence to support that trans women have dominated the women's category.
Transgender women are women and transgender men are men, and both should be permitted to compete as athletes against those of the same gender identity.
People say all sorts of things about testosterone and bone strength that are completely made up.
I'm not a third. I deserve to be a part of the female category. I'm female.
All right, guys, welcome in. Today we have a guest on the show, and it's a guest that's been, a long time coming, I feel like. We've covered her many times on this channel to talk about the good fight that she is fighting every single day now since she rose to prominence just a couple years ago in 2022. It is Riley Gaines. You know her as a former collegiate female swimmer. She's All-American, an Olympic hopeful. And as I said before, she rose to prominence in 2022 in fighting for women's spaces, women's privacy, security, and most importantly, their sports. If you've heard the name Leah Thomas, you've probably heard the name Riley Gaines. And now she has a new book coming out titled Swimming Against the Current, Fighting for Common Sense in a World That's Lost Its Mind. Riley, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. That was a very kind intro, and I could not be more excited to be on with you guys, so thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing. Of course, our audience is probably going to be going crazy because you're a badass, and they know your story, I feel like. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to have some fun. Oftentimes, the challengers to what you believe when it comes to fighting for single-sex spaces in women's sports, you don't get to really see eye to eye. And in the times that you've been to college campuses, of course, it's been a little bit of a problem. I feel like you've been accosted on many an occasion, correct?
Oh, you're entirely correct. I have been spit on. I have had drinks poured on me. I have had bottles thrown at me. I have, of course, been labeled and called the most profane, heinous, obscene things you could possibly imagine. I've been physically assaulted. I've been punched in the face by these men who are wearing dresses, which fortunately for me, their punches really don't hurt that bad. Yeah. I've been held for ransom. I mean, you name it, it's happened. I think even just this past semester, there was probably 10 or 12 people who got arrested for trying to crucify me. So
goodness, it's just unbelievable. Yeah. I wonder, and one thing I'll ask before we get into our TikToks today is, I feel like there's no way you could have ever imagined this was going to be the life that you were going to lead, and you were going to go through these things for something as basic as fighting for a woman's ability to compete in a sport and to have her own space. Is that correct?
Oh my gosh, it really does blow my mind. And I have to think about it sometimes, the notoriety, the platform that I've developed, the impact that it has been able to be had, it blows my mind. I mean, even on X alone, over 1 million followers, and for literally saying men and women are different. There are two sexes, and you can't change your sex. And each sex is deserving of equal opportunity, privacy, and safety. And for saying that, it blows my mind. But yeah, no, I was in dental school after college to be a dentist. So it would be an understatement to say this is a total 180 from what I thought I was going to be doing.
Yeah, no doubt. I feel like the same thing happened to me. I was going to nursing school with the intention of becoming a midwife. And then all of a sudden you make a video and you speak out against something, and then your life goes in a whole different trajectory, all because you just told the truth, which is, it's a very powerful thing. Luckily on today's show, we're in the comfort of our own homes. So we're not going to get accosted for saying the things that we say to these TikToks. You can respond to people who maybe have some criticism for the things that you believe right there at home with the puppies and the dogs and all that fun stuff.
I know. I wish you could see my dog just looking at me right now.
I bet he's proud. We're going to get into TikTok number 1. And these are all going to be focused around the sports argument, because there are, of course, a lot of leftists on TikTok that want to defend the right for transgender individuals to compete in the team of their gender identification. So we'll go into some of the most common arguments, and we'll start off with video number 1.
But transgender women are going to dominate the women's category if we let them play. Since so many people are sharing their uninformed opinions about trans athletes, let's examine a few numbers that are relevant. 1. Transgender athletes have been permitted to play in the Olympics for 20 years since 2003. Trans athletes are not new. If trans women did have some sort of massive advantage, don't you think we would have seen trans women domination occur? Of course we would have. But the reality is that in the past 20 years, we have seen 1 trans woman compete in the Olympics in the women's category. And in the NCAA, trans women have been included for over a decade, and we have have only seen 2 trans women champions in the women's category. 2, some 480,000, so about 500,000 athletes compete in the NCAA every single year. Everybody is talking about trans women winning all these scholarships and taking them from cis women, but I do not know a single trans woman who has ever been awarded an athletic scholarship in the NCAA. There is absolutely no evidence to support that trans women have dominated the women's category. No, cis people dominate sports everywhere. If anything, trans women and trans people are massively underrepresented. 5,000 women compete in the Olympics every time. About 1% of the population is trans. If trans women were accurately represented, we would have 50 trans women Olympians every single Olympics. But most of the time we have 0. In 2021, we had 1. So as always, I remind you, trans people do not threaten sports. Transphobia does.
Ooh, interesting. And he, I guess, he, she, they is the name of the book that they're putting out. So I'm imagining that's going to contend with yours a little bit. What is your uneducated and uninformed opinion on that, Riley?
Well, first of all, I mean, half of the things she said, that's actually a woman. Her name is Skylar Baylor, swam at Harvard, actually, before deciding to transition into a man. But look, to say that the NCAA hasn't awarded any males a female scholarship, that's entirely false. There's a website called shewon.org, and it says over 981 medals have been taken from women, deserving women, by cheating men, affecting over 687 different female athletes and over 483 different competitions, over 35 different sports. Wow. Also, one other thing I want to point out, notice in that video, she's basically saying that there are women, it's so confusing for me. My brain gets so frazzled on all the different things.
Mine too.
She's saying the whole video only talking about men identifying as women, basically not only saying that it's not happening, but actually saying that these men are at a disadvantage. If that's the case, then why didn't she spend any amount of that video speaking to women identifying as men and going into men's sports? And that's because that's not happening. And let's ask ourselves why that's not happening. And of course, that's a rhetorical question. We know why that's not happening. It's because women would never and will never be able to transition into a man, even taking testosterone, and compete at the same level as they did competing against the women. Also, to say that there was only one trans-identified person competing in the Olympics is false. I would imagine who she's referring to is Laurel Hubbard, who is the weightlifter from New Zealand who competed against the women as a man. But what about the soccer player by the name of Quinn playing in Canada, who identifies as non-binary and trans, whatever that means. But it's a female identifying as a male, but of course competed with the females. Nonetheless, still trans. What about the BMX biker who, again, was competing in the category that did not align with their sex? So I know of 3 trans athletes who competed in the last Olympics in their, I guess, not in their rightful category. So again, a lot of misinformation. She posts a whole lot of things that are just entirely false.
It's amazing to me the amount of misinformation I came across on TikTok just scrolling through hashtags on this. And it's interesting that the general view is that in order for women to be threatened in their sports spaces, the men have to be dominating every single category. It's just ridiculous. I mean, how many women have to lose to a biological man for it to matter? In my opinion, it's 1. But they need Olympics and NCAA scholarships, which apparently we still have anyways, according to your information.
It's so true. And how deeply misogynistic to say women are only deserving of equal opportunities if they're competing at the highest level. I mean, how regressive is that? I mean, Title IX enacted in 52 years ago in 1972. This was a huge step forward, not just for women in sports, but women as a sex, as a whole. But by saying that we only deserve to call ourselves champions if we're competing at the highest level is deeply regressive, taking us back in time at least half a century, which is funny because they do this under the guise of progress, as if we're moving in the positive forward direction. But let's be very clear, this is deeply regressive.
Yeah, and we've seen it on so many levels. You know, he references the Olympics and the NCAA. You shared a story recently of, I believe, 13-year-old girls who were protesting a biological boy wanting to throw shot put in their competition. And these are smaller stories that I guess don't rise to prominence or have significance for these people, but these are women's lives that are being affected, and young women in particular. And that just continues and continues until we get to spaces like the Olympics, which we've already already gotten to, and we will continue to. I think this only expands if we don't further debunk some of the messaging here.
No doubt. I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, we got another one, and this is also another prominent figure on TikTok. This is Griffin Maxwell Brooks. I see his videos a lot. Let's hear from him on this issue.
My name is Griffin Maxwell Brooks. I go by they, them pronouns, and I am a trans, non-binary person on the Princeton University swimming and diving team. I'll start by saying this. Transgender women are women and transgender men are men, and both should be permitted to compete as athletes against those of the same gender identity. Recently, some controversy has risen in the Ivy League over whether or not Leah Thomas, a transgender woman on the UPenn swim team, should be allowed to compete. She has abided by the NCAA and Olympic protocol, which require that she be on hormone replacement therapy for at least a year. She's done 2 years, and that her testosterone be beneath a certain level. The reality is that her genetic advantage is no more a source of unfairness than the genetic advantage that we see from person to person within the same gender. Many of you probably know that Michael Phelps has an abnormally large wingspan and produces lactic acid, the chemical that makes your muscles sore, at half the rate of his competitors, genetic advantages which he has over others. The reality is that the opposition to transgender women competing in sports only exists because they are winning, not because people are pushing for equity. Nobody has made any similar statements on how we can accommodate for the genetic advantage when it comes to transgender men in athletics, because transphobic people do not care about equity. They only care about preventing transgender people, women in this case, from winning over cisgender people. It is a recurring tactic among cisgender women to leverage misogyny as an avenue to perpetrate transphobia. By setting themselves apart from transgender women via the same argument of genetic advantage, they justify transphobia by insinuating that trans women are invading their spaces, their bathrooms, and now their sports. We call these women TERFs. Leah Thomas should be allowed to swim as a woman against women because she is a woman. I implore you to do your own research on the science and biology involved in this situation, which back up my points, rather than listening to uneducated figureheads like Caitlyn Jenner who act only in their own political self-interest. And if your argument is that I, Griffin, am not a woman and therefore cannot speak on this issue, I'll leave you with this. Leah Thomas is a woman, and she's telling you how she feels, and you're fighting against her. Have a great night.
So much to say. So much to say. I think it's hilarious when we're speaking about sports, which inherently do not care about your feelings. Do you think the pool ever looked at me, my coaches ever looked at me when I showed up at 4:30 in the morning to jump into a cold pool? I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I don't want to do it. Do you think they looked at me and said, Riley, we understand how you feel today. You don't have to swim. No, not one time ever. Sports do not care about your feelings. Neither does winning. So to sit there and say, look, Leah Thomas, she is telling you how she feels. Well, let me tell you how I feel, Griffin. I feel as if I do agree with him on the part where he said, look, Leah Thomas is following the rules. I have no personal animosity towards Thomas because he was following the rules. It's the rules that I've certainly been challenging here. That's not to say I don't think he's entirely a narcissist and displayed an utter disregard towards our feelings and privacy in the locker room, but he was abiding by the rules. But Griffin, here's how I'll tell you I feel. And the overwhelming majority of the rest of us. And I know this because I can attest to the tears that I saw. I can attest to the extreme discomfort in the locker room. When you turn around, there's a 6'4", 22-year-old man, fully intact, fully exposing himself. I can attest to the whispers, because that's what they were. They were whispers of anger and frustration from those girls who, just like myself, had worked our entire lives to get to this meet. Here's how we felt. We felt betrayed. We felt utterly violated. We felt traumatized. And not even necessarily traumatized because of what we were forced to see, specifically speaking in the locker room, or how we were forcibly and non-consensually exploited. We felt traumatized because of just how easy it was for those people who created and enforced these policies to totally dismiss our rights to privacy without even a second thought, without even bare minimum forewarning us that that would be the arrangement. We felt belittled. We felt mocked. We felt pushed aside. But I'm imagining to Griffin that our feelings don't matter. It is so frustrating to hear this, to see this. It's just angering is what it is. It's disheartening, actually, demoralizing, more so than frustrating. It's disheartening. It makes me feel heartbroken that, again, you have a man, because that's what Griffin is, mansplaining, saying that, insinuating that people like me and you and Caitlyn Jenner are misogynist, yet here we are fighting for the sex-based protections and rights of women. That's the stand that I've taken. It's not anti anything. It's not anti-trans. It's very quickly labeled as transphobic, but no, I'm not standing against anything. What I'm standing for is women. My stand is very much pro-woman, but they'll throw the labels out. They'll call you every name under the sun to try and deter you, to scare you, which shows you, one, how our language has become entirely corrupt. They use words like compassion and inclusion. But again, it's not compassionate to ask a young girl to undress in front of a man. That's not what compassion is. And it's not inclusive to ask us to smile and step aside and allow these men onto our podiums. That's not what inclusion is. No, that's exclusion. And it's exclusive to the very female athletes who the women's sporting category, or specifically Title IX, was created to uphold and honor and celebrate.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because so often they invoke feelings when they're talking about these arguments, and they really don't matter. I hate to, say the facts don't care about your feelings, but it's very much true. And he's tried to interweave in this argument his own facts about the male advantage and saying, some women have a significant advantage over other women when they're in their sports. Let's talk about a post-puberty transitioned man who's decided that they are a woman. We're talking about larger hands, larger feet, bone density, lung capacity, wingspan, as he invokes, Michael Phelps in his video himself. All of these things exist in a post-puberty transitioned body where you might have a little bit of fluctuation in these things amongst women, but we're still all women. I don't know how that doesn't land.
Oh, it's such a good point, and something that is unanimous across the board. If you're looking at sports like swimming or track and field, right? You're going, it's measurable. You're going a specific time, a specific distance, unanimously, regardless of what distance it is, whether it's a 200 or a mile. On average, men are 10 to 12%. That's what the performance gap is. If you take the world record holder, let's say in the women's 200 backstroke, versus the world record holder in the men's 200 backstroke, it's a 10 to 12% performance gap, which is a huge percentage when you're training your entire life to shave merely 1/100th of a second off. So, for example, if you're racing for 100 seconds, a minute and 40 seconds, that let just for easy numbers, a minute and 40 seconds, that's what the woman goes in the world record. The man would be 128 seconds. 88 seconds, which is a minute and 28 seconds. That's a huge, huge difference. So yes, Michael Phelps, he has Marfan syndrome, meaning he has more elasticity in his joints, longer, lankier limbs. That equates to a decimal of a performance gap. And yeah, his competitors, they're all still men.
So thank you for that argument, Grant. But it doesn't stand.
I need to look up that guy. I haven't seen him on my TikTok before.
Yeah, he's all over. And I think he's did like a Vox or a Vice video about being trans or like being about masculinity or something like that. He's all over the place. Also another trans non-binary, whatever that means. Oh, my goodness.
Even know what that means. Oh my God.
Me neither. So we have yet another trans woman who is defending the position of trans women and I guess trans men being able to compete in their sexual or gender identity category. Let's watch.
Some people say that allowing trans athletes to compete in women's sports would result in more injuries to cis athletes or give trans athletes an unfair advantage. But trans athletes are regularly beaten by cis athletes, and even in sports like rugby, they don't cause more injuries than cis women of the same size. People say all sorts of things about testosterone and bone strength that are completely made up because they're doing the same thing, starting with the politics and inventing facts about women's bodies to justify it.
I would ask any anthropologist, any archaeologist, anyone who has studied and understands the human body. Okay. You take two skeletons, a man and a woman, both, of course, two people who have passed away. They're buried. You dig them up 100 years from now. Look at their skeletons, a man and a woman, and ask them if you would be able to tell which one the man is versus which one the woman is. Not only is it bone density and bone structure, women have larger hips, our skulls are different, our jaws are different, our joints and our knees are different. There are so many differences that men and women possess. And that's not even just in humans. That's in virtually every species, males and females, differ in ways that don't make one sex inferior. That's something I hear a lot about this topic is, well, you're saying that women can't compete against men. You're just, you're saying that women are worse than men. No, I'm not saying one sex is inferior or superior to the other, but we're different. And we're different in a way that's really beautiful, that complements one another. And to speak to the injuries piece, yes, women playing against women in sports that require physical conduct or physical contact or where you're throwing something at one another or colliding into each other. Yes, the risk for injury is always there, but the severity and the likelihood of these injuries happening increase tenfold when you put a man on that court or that field. We've seen it. We've seen it in volleyball. We've seen several men give women concussions, season-ending concussions, even career-ending concussions. What about Peyton McNabb, the high school senior in North Carolina? A boy is playing on the opposing team, which, let me just add, a men's net is 7.5 inches higher than a standard women's volleyball net, because it's almost as if they're acknowledging that biological advantages do in fact exist. But nonetheless, this boy jumps up, he spikes the ball, hits Peyton in the face. Immediately she's knocked unconscious, where she laid for minutes before finally coming back around. And this happened in September of 2022. Okay, so a year and what, 8-ish months since then. She's still partially paralyzed on her right side. Her vision is impaired. Her memory is impaired. She has to have special accommodations for testing at school now because she can't retain information like she once could. She has to have weekly doctor appointments, even still. What about the field hockey player in Massachusetts, at Dighton Rehoboth, who, again, a boy playing on the field, he slaps a shot, it hits the girl in the face. She lost all her teeth. She had to undergo facial reconstruction surgery, jaw surgery, to reconstruct her face after being hit by a boy. Or Fallon Fox, the male fighter who brutally beat up many women, Tamika Brents being one of them. I believe fractured 7 orbital bones, 12 orbital bones, something like that. Gave 2 women concussions, fractured their skulls. Yeah, that's not happening when it's just women fighting women.
Yeah, it's awful to hear. I just don't know how anybody could deny the just blatantly clear advantage that exists and has existed so much so that we've decided to divide these categories. And in this next TikTok, we're going to ask you more about solutions, because there's a lot of talk of, well, what do we do with people who are trans and want to be athletes? I'm curious to get your opinion on this. We're going to hear from some trans-identifying individuals on what they think should be happening.
There should be a separate third category for trans people to compete in.
I wholeheartedly, strongly deny the third category introduction, because I'm not third. I deserve to be a part of the female category. I'm female. Males deserve to be a part of the male category.
Also, logistically, it cannot work. There are not enough
athletes in the world to create a third category.
Right. In Utah, let's take Utah for example. Utah is one of the states in America that banned trans athletes altogether. Do you know how many trans athletes were competing in the state of Utah when they passed that ban? 1.
I was about to say probably
What is she going to do? Just go play by herself? Yeah. Like Kentucky, same thing. 2.
Right.
2 kids.
No one's being banned. I hate when they say that. It's a common misconception that we see from the left, not to polarize this issue, but to make it political or divisive. Naturally, it has become that. But we always hear that. They're banning trans athletes. No one is being banned. That's entirely fear-mongering. Just compete where is safe, number 1, and fair, number 2, and that's with your biological sex. So let's be very clear there. But I will say I agree with them in terms of not creating a third category, but I disagree for other reasons, or I agree for other reasons. The reasons I believe that a third category wouldn't suffice is because it would be a category where you still very much have males competing against females. And if safety and fairness matter for every single person, regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation or race or religion or whatever other identity factor matters, which I believe they do for every single person, if you have males competing against females, it's still not going to be safe or fair. So then, okay, do you further split it between males who identify as women and women who self-identify as men? Okay, well then do you further split it between men who have began HRT before puberty and men who took HRT, hormone replacement therapy, after puberty. And sports are the one place where, like I said, you don't look at identity factors. You don't look at anything else because that doesn't matter when you're playing sports. Sorry. The UPS guy just pulled up.
That's all right.
Hey, buddy. Hi. Come here. Do you want to say hi? This is him.
Hello. Oh my gosh. So cute. Look at those ears. My goodness.
The solution is what has been in front of us the past at least 50 years. Males compete against males. Females compete against females. It's not overly complicated. It shouldn't be controversial. If you have a Y chromosome, you shouldn't compete with women. It's that simple.
And honestly, you'd think, a lot of the trans people say, well, this identity is so important to me. It's so important to take on this new life. Well, then, for the sake of your identity, maybe one of the sacrifices is there's just not a fair way to compete in sports with the current condition. And that's just the way that the world works. It's the way the cookie crumbles. But for some reason, that can't be accepted. And interestingly enough, it has to be women's spaces that are entered into, while we are accused of being misogynist. Riley, we could talk about this for hours. Unfortunately, we've run out of time today, but luckily you continue to do this work day in and day out. You're posting on social media. You have a new book coming out. Where can people continue to follow you? What's your final message to everyone watching? Because you're continuing to fight this fight and it's an ongoing one.
That's the truth. Certainly ongoing, certainly getting crazier by the day. That's not to say that I don't believe that the tide is turning, because I truly believe it is because of people like you. You can check out the book. It is called Swimming Against the Current, Fighting for Common Sense in a World That's Lost Its Mind. You can get it anywhere where you get your books. I believe it's on Amazon. It's, of course, a more in-depth account of what we experienced at that national championships, the unfair competition, the locker room, the silencing that we faced, the trajectory of where we're going as a nation, really as a world, how we got to this point, the broader picture of why this matters. Because make no mistake, it's a lot bigger than just women's sports or not being able to hold that trophy on the podium, and what we can do as everyday common sense Americans who intuitively know that men and women are different.
Love that. That's fantastic. I know people are going to be so excited to get this book and to hear more of your account, because I can imagine there's just things that happen that you cannot say all the time with everything that was happening behind the scenes and just so many complex dynamics that are taking place. We're also going to link Riley's social media in the description down below. If you're not already following her, get on it right now, because there's going to be some big things happening over the next few years as we continue to live in clown world, as we call it on this show. Riley, thanks again for being on the show, and we hope to have you back.
You guys rock. Thank you. I can't wait to come back, so thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.